So in reading about your world's history, I'm actually quite impressed at the destructive capabilities that you guys have conducted. My world only had one big war and it resulted in the collapse of, well, just about everything, like a Jenga tower made of wafers. Particularly crumbly wafers. And stabby wafers. Um, hmm. Anyway, your 20th century saw a lot of this sort of thing, and nowhere is it better encapsulated than the Second World War, fought from 1939 to 1945. While I personally find World War I more interesting, World War II definitely requires the extent of discussion it receives. Plus, it just seems weird to you guys if I say I have a favourite war, so I'm going to refrain from saying that. While World War II is discussed very often, parts of it often go ignored. These could be for political reasons, like if a country chooses to just never address the horrors they committed. Japan. Oh, sorry, I've got things stuck in my throat. Others might just be forgotten, faded into a darkened void of seawater, like the several submarines involved in the war. Naturally, this means I am talking about Das Boot, the 1981 German-made film set in the Battle of the Atlantic focused on the German perspective. Das Boot follows Lieutenant Werner, who is assigned to report on the activities of U-Boat 96, as it conducts a hunt through the Atlantic Ocean in 1941. He's introduced to the crew and command structure under the captain, and follows their escapades as they traverse the ocean, avoiding those dastardly Brits and their cheeky destroyers. That's the most basic synopsis I can make regarding the film's plot, because it pretty much is all that simple. It's not a plot-heavy film, it's a very character-focused film, which is excellent for the material. While we see the film's events through Werner's eyes, the film mainly focuses on the captain. He's a good man, he knows how his sub operates and how to work with his crew. But he also appears jaded and doesn't seem to be an actual outright Nazi. In fact, he goes out of his way to state that he doesn't like the direction of the war, and mocks the Nazi officer on the boat. He even shows respect for Churchill, claiming he's putting up a good fight that Nazi command won't acknowledge. I assume this is done with the intent to separate the Germans from the Nazis, as one is a nationality and the other is an ideology, both represented when the crew and the first officer are in conversation. It's also done to convey the human side to this crew. It's very easy to dehumanize the Axis in World War II, and the Nazis don't exactly lend themselves to being sympathetic, unless you find mass murder and open bigotry endearing. But these are Germans, not Nazis. Yes, they're on the side of the Nazis, but they ain't really part of that whole charade. They've got their own ideas, motivations, and observations about the war, made very clear in the opening scene at the ballroom. Pretty ballsy of a 1980s movie to portray this so honestly when it must have appeared so easy to take any other route. They don't pretty it up either. The submarine life is a harsh and unpredictable one, where you're basically contained in a pressurized sardine tin full of hot air and farts, and any small miscalculation can result in becoming wedged in the ocean floor or being bombed by Allied depth charges. It's a constantly tense atmosphere that the film does an excellent job conveying. By the end, hell, even by the halfway point, the crew are exhausted, unshaven and frustrated, but they press on with the mission. Even the Nazi officer by the end relaxes a lot, not bothering to shave or wear his uniform as he did at the beginning. None of this is thrown in your face, you really have to pay attention to notice these details. They happen organically given the situations and dialogue, making Das Boot much more realistic than many other war films. While the film as a whole is definitely worth your time, despite being pretty long, the ending is what really solidifies it as a masterpiece in its depiction of war. Spoilers from now on, so if you must know, yes, I definitely recommend seeing this film. In the climax of the film, the crew returns back to port after being stuck on the ocean floor, following a severe bombardment from the Allies. They return to a hero's welcome, Nazi soldiers saluting them and civilians applauding them along with a big band playing. However, they're barely even off the boat before air raid sirens pierce the exuberant Aryan air. Allied planes approach and bomb the hell out of the base, gunning down troops, the crew, and anyone unlucky enough to get caught by the gunning sights. In the confusion, much of the crew make it into the bunker, their hopes of a quiet and relieving return to solid ground cut to pieces by an Allied propeller. Werner rushes out to try and find the rest of command, only to discover most of them lying dead. Running through the smoke, his eyes land upon the captain, blood trickling out of his mouth as he watches his submarine sink to the ocean floor. And with the boat plummeting beneath the surface of the sea, the captain collapses dead on the ground. Werner rushes forth, only to turn the captain's body over and realize he has gone down, as has his ship. Werner panics and looks around anxiously, before it fades to black and the credits roll. This is a shockingly brutal and abrupt ending, one that kills off most of the major characters without much, if any, setup. However, this actually enhances the experience and makes sense given the situation the characters are in. It's a World War II film that is realistic and grounded. It should be obvious that any of these characters could die. And they do come close several times, either out of boredom or due to an Allied bombing. What ultimately kills them isn't their fault. They've earned their right to a peaceful life away from the war. But given the side they're on, this is just very difficult, if not impossible to achieve. Their struggles against the destroyers, their evasion of the bombs, their desperate attempts to fix the sub's engines after being routed in Gibraltar. These events, the struggles give them the right to escape in any normal story. They've sacrificed enough, they've fought to the peak of their capabilities to ensure everyone gets back safely. And they do, and even then, it's not enough. It's all for nothing. The crew is shot down and bombed, ironically showing that what they were desperate to return to was just as dangerous as living on the submarine. Their struggles, their deprivation of basic human needs like fresh air and cleanliness, their triumph as they evaded the Allied planes and managed to return to port. It was all for nothing. The look in the captain's eyes says it all. He watches as his submarine falls below the waves, thereby cementing that his work was for nothing. His crew lies dead around him, so he couldn't keep them safe. And he dies after his ship, his home, his life, slips into the dark. You can tell, he's more than killed. He is defeated. He committed no mistakes and still lost. That is worse than just being killed in the line of duty. To come so close, yet to have it all turned to smoke and blood in front of you would kill any man. In a poetic sense, it's assumed that a captain's soul is tied to his ship. Well, if that's the case, it's no surprise that he sinks to the floor in a bloody heap as his ship goes under the water. Modern filmmakers should dream to have the climax of their story be as brutal and shocking as this, but they should know they will likely not come close to achieving what the ending to Das Boot does. It's not a conventional film, so to speak. There's no massively drawn out exposition, no obvious arcs to speak of. It's just a very organic and realistic war film that depicts the true life of a submarine crew during the biggest war the world has ever seen. A film that dares to depict the evil side as humans when it would have been very easy to do literally anything else. By the end, you're happy that the crew has made it back to dry, unmoving land. You almost feel like you can breathe fresh air again as they do, only to have it blow up in your face as you're forced to remember that this is war. And in war, nobody gets out unscathed. It's shocking, depressing, and appears out of nowhere, but even then, it's all too real. These men, what they did and how they died, is just one example of many in World War II. And despite it being shown from the bad guy's point of view, this story deserves all the accolades it received, and then some. Das Boot is an incredible film, and a rare example of an abrupt ending that kills off most of the characters but actually enhances the rest of the story. And if you haven't seen it before, I thoroughly recommend it.